What's up, my fantasy affarians, and welcome into episode 5 of Bourbon Sips and Fantasy Football Tips. What's up, my fantasy affarians, and welcome into episode 5 of Bourbon Sips and Fantasy Football Tips. Look, we've talked a lot of stuff lately. We talk top 5 cornerstone running backs and wide receivers. We've talked some coaching changes. We've talked some East-West Shrine guys that I think you should pay attention to for your rookie drafts. But now we're really getting into the nitty-gritty of how to help you win, right? Everybody's got rankings. Everybody could criticize rankings. It's not really a huge help other than to maybe understand where our thought process comes from a little bit. But right now, we're getting into the free agency season. Free agency opens the second week of March. So there's guys that I think you should look to buy post free agency, but there's also some guys that I think you should be looking at right now because they're likely to see a little bit of a value spike afterwards. Or there's a narrative that is just lowering their value at this point in time. So we're going to talk 2 guys in particular, and then I'm going to lump that with 2 unicorn bourbons. And that's kind of the theme of today is unicorns. Those ones that you want to go get, the guys that you need to have. And that's what these 2 bourbons are going to be also. They're two bourbons that I think you absolutely have to have on your shelf that people will call high-end bourbons or unicorns or whatever. And I'm not talking unicorns like Pappy Van Winkle. Look, I've tried most of, not the 23, but all the other Pappies I've had. They're not worth the money. They're just not. It's nostalgia. It's people just wanting it for this status thing. And there are so many other bourbons that are sitting on the shelf that you need to go have instead of those that are just as much unicorns because people might not know about them. So we're going to talk those 2 unicorn bourbons and we're going to talk 2 unicorn free agents. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so let's get into it. We're going to talk my 2 free agent unicorns. But before we get into that, there's 3 things that you always need to take a look at when evaluating your free agents. Doesn't matter whether you're trying to move free agents or whether you're trying to obtain free agents. You have to look at these 3 things. 1, talent, not statistics. Talent, not statistics. Statistics can be deceiving. Talent always wins. Always, no matter the situation. Number 2 is the narrative. Is it a good narrative? Is it a negative narrative? You have to know what all of these people are talking about when looking at these players. What's the buzz? Is there buzz around them being franchise tagged? Is there buzz around them going to a team with poor offensive play? What is the narrative and how can you use it to your advantage? And the 3rd is that contract. Understanding the contract. Understand what contract they're going into. Understanding whether or not you can trust a player going into their 3rd contract as a running back, whether you can trust a running back going into that 2nd contract. There are things that you should pay attention to, and those are the 3 that I think are on the top of my list. Again, it is talent, not statistics. It is the narrative that is helping you go get this player, and it is the contract situation. So 3 rules. Again, you see them on the screen. Do not forget those and use it every time you're looking to try to go get or move a player. So the first guy we're going to talk about, this is a unicorn of all unicorns in free agency. This is a guy that has been top 5 for a number of years, and we've seen him just continuously dominate on fantasy and on the field in real life, and that is Devonte Adams, wide receiver for the Green Bay Packers. That's a nice video, wasn't it? All right, look. So we're going to start with the 3 things for Devonte Adams. We're going to talk talent. Check. We're going to talk narrative. Check. And we're going to talk contract and age, which I'm going to say check. I could see you wanting to give him a question mark, but I don't care. At 29 years old, Devonte Adams has not shown any signs of slowing down at all, right? So I'm giving him a check in all 3 of these blocks, and I think it's a guy that you can absolutely go get. Now, the narrative, right? What is the narrative for Devonte Adams? Well, I think it's pretty easy. Devonte Adams has played with Aaron Rodgers his entire career.
Now he's likely not going to be a Packer anymore, and he's likely not going to be playing with Aaron Rodgers anymore. So you've got to see a dip in a 29-year-old wide receiver going to a new team with a non-Hall of Fame quarterback, most likely. So those are the narratives that I'm pushing for Devonta Adams right now. So now the next thing is, well, what would I give for Devonta Adams? And I think it depends on who owns Devonta Adams. If you have a guy that is a contender that owns Devonte Adams, it's going to be a little bit different approach, right? You're going to have to give them some value now that they think they could take to a championship or help them continue to contend, and is likely going to raise in value over time. So those guys like a T. Higgins, like a DJ Moore, a Deontay Johnson, right? I think that tier of folks are probably where you're looking to go to get a Devonte Adams. But if I'm a contender, I'm not going from Devonte Adams to one of those three guys and nothing else. So throw a 22-second in there. See if that gets the deal done. Maybe you start with T. Higgins for Devonte Adams straight up and see what happens. Maybe they take him, maybe they don't. Then you feed in that 22-second. I don't know that I'd go much higher than that for that tier of player, plus a second-round pick for Devonte Adams. But I think that's about what you're going to need to do to be able to go and get him from a contender. Now, if you're talking the team that owns Devonte Adams is a rebuild, that's a little bit different situation. I don't know if they're not gonna want a second. I don't think that's enough for them, right? It doesn't provide enough value. So now maybe I'm looking a little bit different. Maybe I'm looking at that early first, the 102 to 104 range, something like that, where they can get an elite talent in this upcoming draft on top of, say, a wide receiver 3 that has a lot of upside. And the prime candidate in this situation for me, and I don't think this is fair value, but I'm going to try to sell this narrative anyway, is Gabriel Davis, the wide receiver for Buffalo Bills, and that early first, at 102 to 104, 105 again, for Devonte Adams. So now you have a negative narrative in Adams talking about not playing with Aaron Rodgers, but you have this touchdown upside and the tie to Josh Allen for Gabe Davis. You've got quite possibly the loss of Emmanuel Sanders and Cole Beasley also helping the situation for Gabriel Davis, and his multi-touchdown performance in the playoffs, plus that early first. I think there's a real chance that if you get the right person that has Devonte Adams, that's a kind of trade that you can actually make happen. And look, I love Gabriel Davis, but he is not anywhere near Devonte Adams, especially when Stephon Diggs is still on that team. So I think those two narratives really play well together. Plus that early first will really do what you need it to do to get Devonte Adams. So Devonte Adams, again, checks talent, checks narrative, checks contract, and I think you could go smash him with those values to get on your team. And again, don't do that if you're not a contender. If you're middling, don't do it unless you think he really puts you over the top to go get a championship or to compete this year. If you're rebuilding, do not go get Devonte Adams. He's not a smash for you. This is situationally dependent for your team, okay? So keep that in mind. So let's move to the second free agent unicorn, and that is Chris Godwin, the wide receiver for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Man, I'm really liking these videos. This is nice. But Chris Godwin again, does he check all three blocks? Talent, check. Narrative, check. Contract and age, check, check, check. Right? This dude is money. You watch this guy, he excels everywhere, all over the field. He creates separation no matter where he is, no matter what route he runs. He has excellent route running chops. This guy has all the talent in the world. You've seen this guy be a top 3 wide receiver in yards after the catch 2 out of the last 3 seasons. It's a guy that he creates separation, and in space he can do a lot with the ball. I love Chris Godwin. So that's the talent piece. Number 2, the narrative. Well, what's the narrative for Chris Godwin? You really have 2. You have the ACL tear, and you have the fact he's played with Tom Brady, the greatest of all time, the last 2 years. He can't go to a quarterback that even touches that, right? I don't care if it's Patrick fucking Mahomes. he's not the same as he was with Tom Brady. It just isn't the same. So I've got two narratives that I think you can push with Chris Godwin around the injury and around the quarterback play that he's had in the past. So now we talk check, all three things. So the next thing is, well, Brad, what do you pay for him? Similar to Devonte Adams, two scenarios. If he's on a team that is contending, you're going to do this value, versus if he's on a team that is trying to rebuild, you're going to have to do this, right? So let's talk the contending team first. Again, very similar thought process. You're going to have to give them some value in the now to make sure that it's worth their time. But you're also going to have to provide some youth, because Chris Godwin's 25 now. So what I'm looking at here is more like a Keenan Allen or DeAndre Hopkins type, and an early second in the draft. That's what I'm going to start with. And I would be willing, if it was a late 22 first, I would go with a late 22 first in Keenan Allen or DeAndre Hopkins as well, to try to go get Chris Godwin. I think that value gives them still a win now type of piece, but it also gives them a little bit of that youth with that draft pick thrown in there as well. Plus the uncertainty of Chris Godwin, I think it's a smash play, to be honest. The second is that rebuild. And this is where it gets a little bit trickier, right? Because Chris Godwin's only 25 years old. So for a team that's looking to rebuild, they may be a little more hesitant. So you need to make it worth their while. And for me, I'm looking at guys like Jerry Jeudy or Devonte Smith. Those guys that still have a lot of name value right now. And I'm adding a first on top of that. So I'm going Devonte Smith or Jerry Jeudy and a mid to late 106 to 112 first round pick in the 2022 draft to try to get Chris Godwin. And look, there's narratives around Jerry Jeudy, there's narratives around Devonte Smith as well, so you're going to have to mitigate those and talk back and forth. But I think that's the kind of deal that you can make to really go and get a top tier talent that I think is situation proof. It's a guy that I think no matter what system he goes in, he's going to excel. So Chris Godwin is my number 2 free agent unicorn. So number 1, Devonte Adams. If you're in a contending situation, I gave you the values there, go get him. Really, regardless of situation, I feel like Chris Godwin is a fit for anybody's team, whether you're in that productive struggle, whether you're in a complete rebuild, or whether you're a contender. I think he's a guy that can fit all 3 of those situations right now. So go get those 2 guys. And without further ado, I'm getting kind of parched. So I think we're going to move. We're going to go start to talk my top 2 unicorn bourbons. Sorry, I couldn't wait. I had to take a smell and a little bit of a sip before we got here. But look, we're going to talk 2 of my unicorn bourbons. And again, as I mentioned earlier, this is not the same type of unicorn as what you may hear other people see. These are really my true, like, if I see them on the shelf, I buy them. Period. It doesn't matter the cost most of the time. And I'll talk about the cost of them and their availability. But again, these are, unicorns have to meet 3 things. We talked about the 3 things for my unicorn free agents being talent, narrative, and contract/age. And with unicorn bourbons, it's no different. They got to have a good nose, they got to have a good palate, and they have to have a good finish. Now, for me, the finish is a little less important than the palate and the nose. That's probably how I would rate them. I think palate is the most important thing, followed by the nose being number 2, and then finish number 3 for me personally. But everybody's different, right? If it smells bad, you may not even want to sip it, right? So the nose may be more important to you than the palate or the finish. But if the palate's not that great, but the finish is phenomenal, you may be like, oh yeah, I could drink this all day long. Again, bourbon, everybody, it's to each his own. Everybody has their own personal preferences and whatnot. But look, I'm just here to talk through a couple of the ones that I really like. And I'm going to start with, let's go, the Calumet 14 year. Calumet 14 year. This is actually a sourced bourbon, believed to be Barton, which is who makes 1792, the distillery that makes 1792, which I'm a pretty big fan of most of their content as well. But Look, this is a bourbon that's around $109. You can pretty much find it on the shelf anywhere. If you can't find the 14, you'll find the 15 year, which is pretty similar, but I would actually prefer the 14 because it's about $20 cheaper. So, look, I've come to find out I really like cherry, and this is a cherry bomb. This is one of those things that has cherry on the nose. It's got cherry in the palate. It's got cherry in the finish. It's got a little bit of a spice to the finish, which is nice. But really cherry is what kind of defines this bourbon. So if you are a cherry type of person, I would highly recommend it. And again, the availability of this is everywhere. Calumet is not like a super well-known distillery. They're actually really known for their horse thoroughbred training and whatnot. They've got some horses that have won the Kentucky Derby. They've got some horses that are in the Racing Hall of Fame. So that's more what they're known for, but now they're starting to dabble into this bourbon boom. And look, everything that they make is fantastic. Their small batch is good. They've got an 8, a 10, a 12 year, which are top notch. And they've got their 14 and 15, which I've been disappointed 0 times with them. So I would highly recommend, if you see Calumet, really any of them on the shelf, go buy them, but specifically the 14 and 15 year. Again, $109 for the 14 and $129 for the 15 year. It is highly recommended that you get those if you're a cherry kind of guy. And it's my unicorn because it really is up towards the top of the bourbons that I really like. All right, so the second bourbon we're going to talk about, this is probably more in the alley of what people will refer to as a unicorn. Again, my definition of unicorn is not the bottles that I got to go wait in line for 15 hours to get, right? That's nonsense because there's so many good bourbons on the fucking shelf. You don't even need to do that to get a good pour every day. So this is more along that lines, and I'm talking about Stag Junior. It is from Buffalo Trace. This bottle is batch 15, which is about 131 proof. Just over 131 proof, so a big difference, right? That Calumet is about 96 proof. This is 131. It's a big dog, and it drinks like one. So you get a lot of brown sugar and oak at the beginning. The finish is very long. It's very oaky. You get a good amount of cherry in there as well. And the nose is the one thing that is a little bit different. So the nose on this is very coffee-esque, very tobacco-esque. It's almost like an old school bourbon kind of smell, like what you would expect when you were a kid and you're smelling bourbon. You're like, oh man, it smells like my grandfather, right? It smells like a lot of coffee and a lot of tobacco. At least that's my grandparents. So Stag Junior, if you like the heat, you like brown sugar, and you like that really long finish, this is one that I think you should absolutely have in your collection. MSRP, it's about $60 to $70. You can find it at times. It's a little bit easier to run into, but a lot of times it's not. And when you can't, I wouldn't say, I would not be against paying secondary market. So you're usually looking between $200 and $300 to find this on the secondary market. And if you're looking for like a nice bourbon to have every once in a while on a special occasion kind of thing, I definitely think this is something that I would be willing to pay up for to have in my collection. And there are very few that I'm willing to do that for, but Stag Junior is absolutely one of them. So Stag Junior, Calumet 14 are my 2 unicorn bourbons that you should really think about getting on your shelf, a little higher end, quote unquote, if you want to go that route. But Calumet 14 coming in at $110 and Stag Junior coming in at about $60 to $70 retail value. So we're finished up. We talked 2 free agent wide receivers. We talked 2 unicorn bourbons that you should have on your shelf. So again, if you like what you see, please give me a like, give me a subscribe, drop in a comment. Hey, what are your 2 unicorn bourbons? What are the free agents that you think you should be buying post or pre-free agency that opens up on March the 16th? Let me know. And until then, cheers.